Yes, that's okay. Thank you so much. All good? Perfect. Thank you. I'm told that you have to speak really closely to the microphones so that people can hear you because the sound isn't too good. Thank you. Here you go. Thank you. Good session. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this seminar on decarbonizing offshore maritime industry. And it's my honor to moderate this session and give some introductory remarks. And thanks to DP World, our great partner here, for hosting this event. My name is Erik Gjerski. I'm heading the ocean work at the UN Global Compact. So the UN Global Compact is the private sector arm of the UN, chaired by Secretary General Antonio Guterres. We're headquartered in New York, but we have about 70 offices around the world, 700 staff, and we work with more than 25,000 non-state actors, mainly corporate sector, around the world, to understand how can the private sector be a driving force in addressing the 17 SDG in a principled way. So we're addressing climate, we're addressing biodiversity, human rights, labor rights, anti-corruption, and good governance. Very important things for the private sector to get correct. We work with the specialized UN agencies, we work with governments and international institutions. Today, we're going to talk about the role of the maritime industry. I would like to roll back a few years. I used to work in shipping myself. I was a director at the Norwegian Shipowners Association. It's a big, one of the biggest shipping fleets in the world. And back in 2015, when we saw the emergence of the Paris Agreement, we saw that neither aviation or shipping was part of the deal. Very interesting. Two footloose industries, and we'll actually return on into aviation later on in this discussion. And it concerned us. If you're not part of the deal, if you don't have a seat at the table, how will the regulations look like? So we went down to Paris, we hosted our own side event outside the blue zone and green zone, together with the government of France, the French ship owners, and WWF and a few others, saying shipping has to be part of the deal. We have to also align with the 1.5 trajectory. But most people at that time thought that's impossible. You can't decarbonize shipping. It's a heavy industry, and if you cut out shipping, you're cutting out the economy of the world. It's transporting 80% of all the goods in the world. We really need it. But we said, that's not an excuse. We still have to decarbonize because we have to save the planet. And since then, 6 years later, at COP26 in Glasgow, the whole industry aligned. All the members of the ICS, the academic institutions, the NGOs aligned on this. And from 2026 until this summer, the industry pushed the governments and IMO to finally decide on the GHG strategy that we got this year, which is fantastic news. Because this new strategy means that this industry have a global regulation. So to have a license to operate a ship, you have to follow that strategy. There will be a carbon intensity index, and we will have a pathway for decarbonization. Very interesting. It's a big industry. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be super hard, super expensive, and we don't know what technology will actually prevail. That's part of the discussions we're going to have here today with this fantastic panel. And I think that this is also the opportunity just to set the expectations for this discussion. It's when you decarbonize, when you transition 70,000 ships out there, if you take the larger fleet with service vessels and large fishing vessels, more than 100,000 ships have to decarbonize. That transition opportunity, you can plug in biodiversity, the social aspects of a just transition, and not only can you do that, I think you have to do that to really succeed in transitioning this. We can't only have Danish and French companies building these vessels, running these vessels, or a few companies running all the ports. This is an opportunity to have a collective transition so new countries also can tap into this fantastic economy. So that's the backdrop. We have now a very big moment in time here at COP, where finally we have one of the major industries in the world starting their journey to decarbonize. And we're going to talk to a few panelists here today, because this means we're going to build ships. We're going to talk about the dry docks of DP World. We have to get the fuel access of these ships, and we have to have the capacity at ports to fuel them. So let me start with you, Rado Antolovic. You're the CEO of Dubai Dry Docks World. Big player in actually getting the assets on the water and repairing those who needs, or retrofitting those who needs to be retrofitted. So what is your state of play today, and what are your expectations going forward?
Thank you, Eric. Firstly, just for sake of understanding, Dry Docks World is one of the largest shipyards globally, specialized in oil and gas, new generation and renewables. And we are an EPC company, engineering design, procurement design, and of course construction, with 16,000 strong force of all trades and expertise. When we talk about our aim aligned to UN SDG and IMO Convention, and of course COP28, I wish to highlight that we are focusing not only to reduce the CO2 emissions, and we are fully aligned, being a DP World company and a Dubai-owned company, to our neutral CO2 by 2040 and negative by 2050. But there are many other ways which we can do to reduce the emissions, and of course to contribute to the ocean, to the clean ocean. And that starts with a good planning, in addition to regulatory issues as IMO Convention and UN SDG, as I mentioned. We have in place a long-term master plan, and one of the strategic pillars is sustainability. And when I talk to sustainability, I really like to quote Hillary Clinton, who I listened to yesterday, and she said, sustainability is nothing without resilience and without inclusion. And it is, and it's very, very true. We're living in our world, and our world is our future. And I really like that, because to transfer that in practice is very important. In practice, what are we talking here? Firstly, to manage 16,000 people, they will produce CO2. So all our people at the facility are riding around with push bikes or bicycles. That's the start. We recycle over 80% of the materials, or even paper. Of course, we don't use plastic. Maybe that comes normal, but it's not normal. Very important when we come to construction of huge products as being high voltage DC or AC boxes. What do I mean? These boxes produce from the windmill energy into the oceans. They are located in the oceans. They are huge boxes of 100 by 80 by 60 meters by 25. Now new generation, 35,000 tons. And they're connected to multiple windmills. And those cables are transferring the windmill clean energy into the high voltage energy for the household. We made a number of those, and they're all efficient. The lifespan is 30-35 years, and can you imagine one can convert clean energy into 1 million households? We are planning to do a number of many more. As we're talking, we just closed the contract with our joint venture partner, Aker Solutions from Norway, and many more to come. But we are also doing, on the other hand, the floating supply production offload, conversion from ultra-large liquid tankers, or even build new one, new generation. What are these new generations? Not only that they will convert and pump the oil and gas and filter it, they are like floating refineries, but they will do it in an environmental friendly way, and they will be either connected or they were hybrid. They have hybrid engines whereby the either diesel or LNG produce also electricity for genset, which of course are required for such operation. There are many, many other examples we do in sense of services. We do repairments for all type of vessels, and we do conversions from standard classic propulsions, heavy oil into LNG or ammonia. We do change of bulbs to be more energy efficient. We do change of propulsions. We did over 300 water ballast treatment tanks to protect our oceans. This is by IMO conventions and a must. We also do open and closed scrubbers. Some of the, of course, ocean carriers adopted, some didn't. I personally believe that the closed cycle scrubbers make sense. Open scrubbers, unfortunately, they don't give that results because they push CO2 into the oceans. Nevertheless, one example also, which I would like to share with you, being one of the largest shipyards, we have 3 large dry docks. Still the largest dry docks of 525 meters by 110 meters by 50 meters water depth. And you imagine 300 vessels serving a year, how many million tons of water we pump in and then we push out into the oceans. We do have the state-of-the-art, the cleanest filters. We just discovered close by in the bay we are, and on the left side of us is Nikki Beach, 1.5 kilometers is the Tola is the center of Dubai, and we discovered corals, living corals. Living corals don't live in polluted water. So I'm very, very proud of that. Last but not least, education and awareness are the most critical factor. And we have to work harder and harder on that. And we at Dry Dock DP World are very proud of that because we are a leader in educating our people, in make sure that they are aware what they do and they align with the new technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Radu. And I find this extremely interesting because you're actually doing 2 things at once. You're facilitating and helping the offshore industry getting greener by building, retrofitting, and maintaining, and also building converters for the industry, while at the same time you're tackling your own footprint on the onshore business to do this. So could I just a short follow-up question for greening the dry docks? How do you access green energy for the dry docks?
Thank you. That's very interesting questions. Presently, of course, you can start with this small action like changing the lamps to LED. You can change the equipment which is obsolete, or rather say old style, where it burns a lot of diesel. So you put electric generators rather than diesel generators. There are a number of other technologies, but recently we signed an agreement with DEVA, and we will connect in 2-3 years to come with the new solar panel largest in the region, or one of the largest solar panels electric factory, if I call it, to actually be connected to the CO2 clean energy, and all our facility will be using that electricity. There are also many other factors which we can do. I mentioned about push bikes. You just imagine to move the people, 16,000 people in and out of our facility with the cars, how much energy you would consume. But it goes into other things. We have a compound whereby we actually feed 3-4 times a day our strong labor force, educating people not to have a waste in food. And can you imagine how much water is spent to have a kilo of meat or a kilo of vegetables or a kilo of fruit? So if you can reduce that, but in a proper way, through education, and we do reduce that substantially, how much energy you are saving, and actually you're reducing the CO2 effect. So there is a sliding way of many factors. When we go into procurement, we are very much aware, and though also we are pre-qualified by the major oil and gas company and the leading companies, whereby they are also align with not just IMO convention, but make sure that they align with the CO2 emission, United Nations SDG, and many other regulatory issues. So we make sure our procurement choose the best and the really clean equipment and clean materials which are then produced into our production line. But I would say something, the technology is evolving so fast. During COVID, we saw actually a boost of technology, and though that could produce some hurdles, the education, again I'm highlighting, is critical mass to be on top of it. But I should not be forgetting another important factor, joint ventures and exchange of technology and know-how. We do that continuously. I see just in this hall a colleague of mine from MAN. They are also our joint venture partners. They are leaders in a new technology for the propulsions, and we are very proud to have them as partners because number of our expertise, engineering, mechanics, and any other in these particular technologies is trained by them. And that is very much important because it then spreads that knowledge across. Thank you.
Perfect. And that's a very good segue to you, Roberto Ceni, head of the Maersk McKinley Møller Center, the center with a very long name, for zero carbon shipping. And knowledge and joint venture. So that's a massive joint venture. It's an institute, it's a research institute, but it's really joined by the whole industry, I would say. At least the largest part of the industry is working with the Maersk McKinley Møller Center to provide knowledge. Super interesting. And if you want to know about the decarbonization of shipping, these are one of the big hubs that you can go into and have a full map. And I'll let you explain what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Eric. So just to make a precision, I am the head of biofuels at the center. I'm not the head of the center. My CEO will not be happy of this dethronization. So the center is a research institute. We were founded by Maersk 3 years ago, and however we are established as a not-for-profit. So our research doesn't support necessarily Maersk only, but we are basically supporting the decarbonization of the whole shipping industry. We finance ourselves through collaboration with partners, and DP World, I have to mention, is one of the very dear friends we have at the center. The partners that we have are chosen to be companies that can make a difference throughout the value chain. So we have companies that are logistics giants, like for example DP World. We are many shipping operators. Maersk is one. There are smaller ones like Norden, Stolt, and so on. But we also have energy companies, and here the link to knowledge is extremely important because energy companies are those that basically educate us with respect to what they can do, what future fuels can do. We have technology suppliers, Siemens, Alfa Laval, Topsoe are some of the names that you might find familiar. So we have tried to align a series of partnerships that allows us to cover the whole supply chain. The partners support us financially, but also, and perhaps most importantly, they support us with knowledge because they send secondees, so their own personnel is actually sitting with us at the center, and we run projects together to make sure that we all can exchange the knowledge and we can kind of piggyback from each other's experience and success stories.
And to follow up on that, I mean, this is a big undertaking, and it's very interesting because we're going for really a singular fuel mechanism on marine diesel. We have some LNG, but mainly marine diesel, into a plethora of alternatives. And your center, even though you're head of biofuels, the center in itself is agnostic. Looking at all the viabilities of the different fuels, what is the safety aspects, availability aspects, usability aspects, different kinds of shipping segments from cruise to offshore service to cargo. And what's the sentiment of the industry at this point in time?
Yeah, in my opinion, this is one of the very big source of uncertainties. There are others, but this is a very big source of uncertainties because really shipping is blessed by having rugged engines that can be operated with various different fuels. But this also exposes shipping to the uncertainties about which one of those fuels is actually preferable. So here we have a long list of candidates. Many of you might be familiar with operating ships with LNG. LNG is a brilliant fuel for the interim period because it allows some 20% reduction in emission. However, for example, LNG is only brilliant as far as your containment of fugitive emission is brilliant. So if your ship is leaking methane, or if the supply chain of your LNG supplier is leaking methane, those benefits are non-existent, and LNG can actually be worse than heavy fuel oil. Going forwards, we see biofuels coming as a kind of a first line of defense. Some of the biofuels are available today. We have biodiesel, for example, which is one that is already used today. The problem with biodiesel is that if it has to be produced from sustainable resources, the supply of biodiesel is simply not sufficient. So we are not going to be able to cover all our needs to 2050, but unfortunately I have to say we are not even able to cover our needs by 2030. So really there is not a lot of it if it has to be produced sustainably. Biomethane is another option, is something that we have developed a lot, and we really believe in. Similar issues as LNG is a brilliant thing as long as there are no methane fugitive emission to the atmosphere. Otherwise, it's worse than other things. Going towards the future, alternatives like electrofuels are we believe at the moment, are most likely going to be the prominent ones. Methanol, e-methanol, for example, ammonia, or e-methane, perhaps. But to really harvest those opportunities, power capacity has to be established, and there seem to be bottlenecks there. So it's not going to be, that future is not going to be the 2030 future. It's going to be a little bit farther ahead.
Unfortunately, because we need results now, but definitely this will take time. And maybe turn to you, Tom Monbayeux, International Community Relations Manager at the Port of Antwerp Bruges. You are at the crossroads here, you know, land and sea. You're going to be a service institution for the vessels. You have your own footprint to take care of. And at some point in the future, you have to cater with these fuels. So what's your take on the situation now, and what's the play going forward?
So before answering your questions, let me share some characteristics on our port, because we're a bit of an atypical port. So the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, it's one of the largest ports in the world, 145 square kilometers. It hosts Europe's largest integrated petrochemical cluster. We are handling nearly 290 million tons of cargo. 12 million TEU of containers is being handled on a yearly basis. And when we are talking about decarbonization, we're touched by decarbonization in different domains. First of all, we need to serve. We're a service provider as a port, so we want companies inside our port to feel welcome. We are working together with them. It's our mission actually to reconcile people, climate, and profit. So we have embraced the 17 UN SDGs. We also embrace the 2050 climate neutrality goals, and that's our focus point. Now, working towards the realization of that mission means that we need to work on each of the different aspects: maritime, industry, and energy supplies. Now, your question was actually about the maritime sector. A couple of years ago, we joined the Getting to Zero coalition. I'm quite sure that most of you know this coalition. And they came out with a remarkable study. 80% of the investment needed to decarbonize shipping will have to be made on the land side, which involves ports, obviously. Yeah. So when we decided to join that coalition, we also committed to the goal of that coalition, namely to get 5% of the world's commercial fleet zero emission by 2030. As a port authority, we need to know what the sector is doing. We need the type of vessels that is being built. We need to know more about the type of fuels that they will use. But we remain agnostic. We can help with regulations. We can help with preparing the infrastructure, which is required actually to service that industry. But we also can walk the talk. And we have decided to invest in greening our own fleet. So already this year, actually next year, because it will be 2024, we achieved the goal of having 5% of our own vessels being zero-emission vessels. So just by walking the talk, just as you are doing actually, we are trying to inspire, but we're also trying to launch a kind of a learning curve, because developing a hydro tugboat means that it's our obligation actually to share the best practices with that Hydrotug to inspire other sectors as well. And of course, we also ordered a Metatug, a tugboat on methanol. We also ordered one on electricity. So we are really going the full scale, just to prove that it's possible and to incentivize actually local companies and global companies to join us in that endeavor. Huh?
Yeah, very interesting, Tom. And just to touch upon what Rado said earlier, this takes a lot of education because there are new fuel types, new machines, new handling technologies, safety guards. I mean, it's a lot to take on multiple fuels here. So how do you see the education and the training programs being a part of this?
It will be crucial. Just as sports will be crucial actually in the whole of the energy transition, training and education will be crucial to make sure that we have the workforce in the future that is trained to handle with this new type of fuels, and perhaps not only new type of fuels, old products which will be used as fuels, which will require new regulations, new handling, new SOPs, and so on. So education, it's crucial.
Exactly. Very good. Maybe I can turn back to you, Rado. You said joint ventures is very important for you. I would like also to dive more deeply into what do you see as the main drivers of demand for this greening of shipping? Is it international processes like this, international regulations, or is it already a demand side from your clients to address this? And how can your partnerships maybe even strengthen those demands? Just to pose a question.
Thank you. Actually, through my perspective, I see this a combination. I mentioned before a few very important factors. The technology is evolving faster than ever. We heard it all the time. But in real sense, I see in our business line, technology has grown in the last 5 years, I would say 4 or 5 times more than in the last 10 years or 20 years. Today, the product we are producing, the conversion boxes, if I call it, it's a huge pipeline for the next 30 years. We are talking here in terms of money, almost hitting $250 billion. So we are talking here about 150, 170 of those platforms. Conversion or new build of floating supply production, offload vessel or FSRU for the gas. For the next 15 years, we see around $70 to $18 billion already tenders announced. So it is a commercial. But I need to use an opportunity here. And I was listening carefully to my colleagues left and right. And, you know, we always talk about people and education and awareness. But I still feel somehow that inclusion, not just inclusion of women and equal rights, but inclusion of diversity is so critical. It's so critical. We discussed about South Africa, which can do anything, what we mentioned, but unfortunately it didn't happen. So I'm actually today extremely proud, and I didn't even promote. I just find out that number of my youngest team, and youngest team actually from UAE, from Dubai, is here. And what is happening here today, and I know I sound as promoter, but I actually speak from my heart. What's happening today in Dubai, UAE, to have COP28, and to have the COP28 not just as legislative meetings and then writing and signing agreements, but I can see in practice millions of examples. I've been around for a short time, but maybe not millions, but thousands of practical examples which can be and are adapted. And it's not about tomorrow, it's about what we're doing now. We have an opportunity at every second to do something better, and we need to do it together. And I really wish to highlight it's our world and it's our future. And it is my job, has been in this industry all my life, to do whatever I can do to educate and pass on to new generations. And I'm actually very, very proud, yes. But to answer your question in a short term, it's becoming very commercial. And no, against all the odds, people saying, oh, it's the cost, we're not being profitable. I hear that all the time. Well, find a way to be profitable. It's a must. It's not any more alternative. We want to live in a nice world, find solution. And there is a solution to find. Working together, we will find solution, we find solution. Thank you.
That's a perfect point, because after all, we are at the Climate Finance Pavilion. This is really the core of the economy, is understanding these trends. These are mega trends. These are decades of investments, decades of asset play in this very global, volatile industry. You can own, man and crew a ship from anywhere in the world, and that will be even more globalized the next years. But it's interesting. You know, we are talking about methanol, biofuels, hydrogen, ammonia, hybrids, battery-powered ships. And you know, how many ships can we power today on green ammonia?
Say it again, sorry? The question
How
was?
many ships can we power today on green ammonia today?
I would say zero,
Of
unless
course,
you have
zero.
a very small one.
So, just to build it into a bigger question, there is no green ammonia today because this is just happening now. The transition starts now, this year. And what we will see, so I think Semasa GM announced 100 new ships, more than 100 new ships, ammonia ready in the pipeline. Höegh Autoliners, 12 car carriers coming out the next few years. Maersk, similar large amounts of new ships. They're all ready. So when will the fuel be ready?
Yeah, this is actually, the industry is approaching this with trying to build flexibility in their operation. First of all, we get precious help from engine manufacturers. At the moment, ships are trying to be, there are concepts to make sure that ships can actually change fuel over their lifetime. So it doesn't have to be, if you once settle for methanol, it doesn't have to be methanol for the rest of the 25 years of the life of the ship. It can be changed into something else. So that's a precious help. Another precious help is in the fact that most of the ships are dual fuels. So they can bunker the alternative fuel, and if there is no availability of alternative fuel, they can bunker a traditional liquid fossil fuel. Of course, that doesn't help decarbonization, but it can help the economy towards making sure, for example, focusing on one specific port that has the fuel available, and then bunkering always alternative fuel in that port, and then when the ship is navigating, is sailing in other waters throughout other ports, than using a traditional fossil fuel. So there are a lot of mechanisms built in to help flexibility. Also, I would like to mention a very, in my opinion, an interesting aspect of the FuelEU Maritime that, as you know, is coming in force soon. The FuelEU Maritime has provision to pool alternative fuels not only among components of the same fleet, but also among different fleets. This means that if your friend has an LNG ship that can be operated with biomethane, and your friend, so to say, a fleet that you can make an alliance with, can generate abundance of credits, then actually this can be shared onto your ship as well. This mechanism is built in the FuelEU Maritime. It's not clear if it will be built in the IMO regulation. So there is around the IMO new strategy. There is still a little bit of uncertainty. There are not all the dots and the commas are in place. So there is a little bit of uncertainty. But I think regulators are trying to be helpful in this. And but again, the key word about cooperation and really making sure that you approach these as a common challenge and not just as from your own individual point of view, can help really, particularly the small ones, those that don't have the financial muscles to invest in new alternative fuel production, to actually meet the mandates without excessive expenses.
Extremely important point. And I'd just like to highlight that there will be a scarcity of renewable energy. It's a real bottleneck going forward. Today, Amazon is the biggest buyer of renewable energy globally. They buy this much, and the number 2 is buying this much, and the biggest aluminum producer is buying this much. Because Amazon has a strategy to have net zero 2025, all the data centers globally, also here in Dubai. And they're doing that by buying all renewable energy they can get their hands on. So shipping is coming late into this very, very competitive game. Some of the ship owners that work with us, they are now sourcing their own energy. So Sema CGM, for their biofuel ship, they actually bought a bio-waste plant in France. Because when you have two ships that is going to run on biofuels, you have to cater for that fuel. You can't leave that to the open market at this point. Very important for any capital market analytics here or investors, because we also see that in ammonia, in hydrogen and biofuels, that if you build 100 ships, and you know that you're not going to power all of them immediately on green energy, but you have to phase in that green energy into that market, into that pool of ships. You need to know that you can access that energy 2 years from now, 8 years from now, and 16 years from now. So that's a big play in this global industry that we have to take into account. I know Dubai is doing a lot. Egypt with the Suez Canal is opening its first port. It's never been a port in the Suez Canal, very interesting. But now they're going to build a green petrol station, solar-based, very interesting. So they're going to be new players in this port world. What's also interesting, and I'm taking that to you, Tom, is that some of these fuels is extremely dangerous. Hydrogen is mega explosive. You know, we have seen terrible incidents on that. Ammonia, it's already a commodity stored in ports all over the world, but not in these quantities. And definitely never been used at cruise ships as a fuel, because ammonia is very poisonous if in close range, if airborne. So, Tom, how do you work with the community to turn Antwerp into a big energy hub with billions of hydrogen and ammonia fuels containers?
Now, actually, first on the hydrogen, already today in Antwerp we have a hydrogen refueling station. So we have a number of smaller vessels using hydrogen as their main fuel for propulsion. So that's working, and I invite you to come to Antwerp to see. It's a large port next to a bit smaller city, so the city is very nice to visit. But you will see that actually it's the refueling station is nearby the residential area. That's the first thing. Second thing, I mentioned that our port hosts the largest integrated chemical cluster in Europe. So already today, it's not only hydrogen intensive, but also a huge ammonia hub. I think last week, actually, we held the first green ammonia conference in Antwerp to say that, or actually to explore the further expansion of the ammonia storage and facilities in our port, because we do believe that ammonia will be a game changer. In the longer term, not tomorrow, but it will be a game changer for sure. For sure, we have been able to deal with ammonia for the last multiple decades. So it's a known molecule. You have procedures, you have regulations. It's being transported, not at that scale that we will require it, but we are confident that innovation and technology will be found at the right time. So actually we like to see and we like to say that we are pioneering as a port authority. So we are involved in a number of non-directly port-related actions, maintaining close relations with energy producers on the other side of the ocean, for example, looking at Oman, looking at Namibia, Chile, to learn and to increase, because at the end, that's what I earlier said, we are going for the 2050 climate neutrality, and that we cannot lose sight of that specific goal. So we see there is a need to become active, to create impact beyond our port's borders. And that includes dealing with the unpleasant part of the business, exploring, talking to partners, sharing best practices, doing a joint study, for example. And we mentioned education and training also for the public. They will require education and to be informed and to have a kind of an awareness on the typicality or the specificalities of certain products, their impact. But we don't need to scare them because it's already in Antwerp, it's present, so we are a huge ammonia terminal, and in the future we will be a green ammonia terminal.
Very promising, very promising. I'll definitely come and visit you. And a lot of people talked very warmly about it. And But ports are not ports. I mean, there are so many different ways to be a port. And the most challenging, I think, working with ports is the ownership of ports. Some ports are the ownership of the municipality. Some are privately held, some are governmentally held, some have military use, some have non-military use, some have food and fishery reception areas, some are pure play container ports, service vessel ports. It's a very mixed world of stakeholders when it comes to the owner side of this. Who owns the Port of Antwerp, and what is the added value for your shareholders, stakeholders, or owners in going green?
Okay, two things. First of all, on the complexity. I used to work for NATO many years ago, and at my first day at NATO, there was a guy showing me a picture of a NATO stakeholder map. No, not stakeholder mapping, the NATO organization. It looked like the Milky Way, really. So many stars that are connected. The same goes for ports. It's a complex environment. We have a really complex stakeholder mapping exercise if you want to start with it. That's the first thing. Second thing, we are a public authority, right? We are organized as a private company, but our shareholders are the city of Bruges and the city of Antwerp. So it is in these two cities, these two municipalities, it's in their interest to have a well-functioning port, because a port, we are also an economic driver, for example. So we do generate some money. We are a responsible employer. I think over 160,000 people in our area are earning their daily, their monthly wages because of port-related activities. So there is only one way to go, and that's the green way. Yeah? It's you know the Kermit song. Kermit once said, "I like to be green." Huh? Yeah, so that's it. The same goes for us. We like to be green, so we embrace it, and that's really the way we have to go forward. And also the cities, they agree, of course, because we are not governed by them, or because we have a management committee, but they are, of course, represented in our board of directors. So, and they keep an eye on the sustainability of our actions.
And this is a very important aspect on the finance side of this, because a lot of capital is coming into ports. And I think there are two main avenues of investing in ports. It's really the real estate play. Many ports are in the middle of a city. It's an old infrastructure with fantastic opportunity to build housing and offices. It happens all the way, and you push actually the cargo out of the city. You have to put it on trucks and drive it back in, which is just a terrible idea. But here in Dubai, we have ports along the coast, which I think is looks to me at least as a good setup. But to you, Rado, for your owners, do they see the value of green as valuable as a regular vanilla return on investment? Or what are the drivers internally in your company and your board?
If you allow me, Eric, I was actually listening again to my colleagues here, and I hear about the future, the future. I really need to highlight this, and I will answer your question fast. I want to tell to the podium as data that 20, 30 years ago, this kind of forum was not available. That's very important. I also want to tell as the shipbuilder, and that's in my DNA, if we look today a vessel, and a ton of the deadweight of that vessel is today almost 40% greener than it was 30 years ago. What do I mean? Yep. Production of that is done faster, less emission of CO2, less pollution. Materials are done better and produced better with less CO2 emission. The design is done in a different way that it will last better. The paints are not abrasive, which means they don't pollute the oceans. The technology of, I mentioned water ballast treatment tanks, I mentioned scrubbers, I mentioned the dynamics of the vessel, propulsions, and of course, yes, today we also have LNG, and I hear you, LNG is a short, medium-term solution, but it's still 20% less than heavy fuel, and actually is much less in sense of pollution when some vessels still don't have water ballast treatment, unfortunately, but hopefully this will disappear soon. So if you look to this spectrum, today really we are not in the starting point. So I don't want to be super positive, but I want to say the progress of becoming greener has started some time ago. It's becoming more regulatory, it's becoming more profound, it's becoming more technologically advanced, the awareness is becoming on a bigger scale, and we are in the right path. We are still running behind the timing, and we will need to do much, much, much more to meet this neutral CO2 emission 2040 and zero 2050. I am actually very positive about that, but I'm also conscious that a lot of work needs to be done. Now, to mention you, yes, we are in the heart of Dubai. We are a shipping yard in the heart of Dubai. How is possible? We are actually a government-owned company, but we are very much commercial, and we have though we have a free call, it's kind of concession, whereby we need to abide recently due to the municipality regulatory issue now to Terrakis, which is PCFC, which is a custom Dubai UAE organization, and very, very high standards. I mean, extremely high standards. We have compared IMO, if I compare SOLAS convention or any other convention, I can tell you something that is incredibly difficult to obtain all the licenses. I'm proud to say I do have it. It's not just environment, safety, health standards. Then we are actually audited by human rights. Human rights. And I'm very proud also that is thick. And why I'm highlighting human rights, because that gives you a platform to really have that diversity and the talent. And yes, it makes sense. We did some 3 years ago, no, actually before COVID, a study looking the ocean on the left side, we have Nikki Beach. Nikki Beach is one of the 5 top resorts in Dubai. And behind us is a residential. We have compact of 10,000 people. And we ask, do we interfere with any kind of environmental issue, being noise, being lights, being everything? Amazing reply, official reply. No, we are quite amazed to see coming ship in and out. No, we never saw the pollution, neither noise pollution, everything. We like it, and I'm sure that applies to your ports. Very important that we work close to the municipality, that we close to any stakeholders in Dubai. Very important that we show the people who are living around us, including tourists, that we are actually a green business. And yes, it's very commercially not only sensitive. We produce 16,000 people direct income. We produce, together with DP World in Dubai, 23% of Dubai GDP because of direct, indirect involvement. And yes, this is a clear influx of stable currency. And yes, we are green and we are becoming greener. Thank you.
Very good. And I totally like your comment on this. You know, I'd love to go to Nikki Beach, but maybe even more to your port, just to see how it is.
Always welcome, and what I told you, you will see it. Maybe you will see something I don't even know.
Yeah, very good. Tom, please.
Yeah, can I come in on what you're saying? Because indeed, as the name of our port is Port of Antwerp-Bruges, right? So in Antwerp, we're actually a very large port of 120 square kilometers. The other platform is at the coast. So at the Belgian coast, a very small coast, 70 kilometers, a bit less. But in the middle of that coast, there is a port, 30 square kilometers, with Europe's largest and most important LNG terminal. Today, over 15% of the LNG imported in Europe goes over the port of Zeebrugge. But the neighbors of the port of Zeebrugge, it's the most expensive real estate that you can imagine in the whole of our country. So it is possible to exploit an economically viable port close to a high-price residential area, even for tourists. Huh? So it's possible, yeah, and it will be more and more the future. You see it here, you see it in Europe, yeah.
And these are important takeaways. So at the UN Global Compact, we have local networks all over the world. And yesterday, together with DP World, Maha Al-Katan and Sando Jambo, the Assistant Secretary General of the UN and CEO of the UN Global Compact, we announced a new Ocean Climate Nexus Center here in Dubai to bring the community of ocean industries together to discuss these principles and standards of best practice and how we can promote this into regulatory priorities for the governments. So this is something we'll get back to you if you're interested to work with us on. But it's important that the industry continue to take this lead because we are in an urgency. We have to make these decisions now. What kind of future do we want to have soon? And we also have a large program supported by the Lloyd's Register Foundation in 8 other countries, from the Philippines to Bangladesh to Brazil, to do the same, so we can also have a global south, global north collaboration on this. Because this cannot be only the developed nations' play, it has to be a collaborative and just transition. It's a big opportunity for us. So we want shipping companies, energy companies, ports in Indonesia, in South Africa, in Ghana to work together with us. And you know, these ships, they travel to these places and they need to understand if they can build their energy systems there, if they can build their fuel supply systems there, and if they can actually collaborate with local shipping community on developing this. So there is an urgency. And maybe returning to you, Roberta, and I will have to say it again. You have to visit the website of the Maersk Mc-Kinley Møller Center. You can, I think it's called like zerocarbonshipping.com or some much easier name. It has a very nice tableau of the different fuels and the readiness and the safety side and all the kinds of metrics that we need. I think it also has some timelines. It has some studies that was done a year ago or something on the different studies. But as Rado said, we have to speed this up. It's happening now. How can we speed this up? What's your main takeaway on that?
Yeah, from Central side, we are trying to create options for the industry to kind of speed up the transition. So there are a few different initiatives that we are setting up. For example, one of them is we are creating a fuel demand aggregator. That the concept there is to establish a kind of a buyers club. We realize that large shipping operators, again, as said before, they can invest in production facilities, but the smaller one perhaps cannot. So by creating a demand aggregator, we are trying to pull the demand of these very many small shipping operators that actually don't know how to progress further in the quest of achieving the alternative fuels that they need. We are creating other things, like, for example, the Book and Claim initiative. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Book and Claim is a system to pass to each other the chain of custody of green attributes of a fuel. So this means, and that doesn't require physical transport. So this means that basically you can make some green ammonia when that will be available in Chile, and then you can put it on a ship in Chile, but perhaps that specific ship doesn't have a consumer that is able to pay for that. So the ship is able, it can sell the green attributes to somebody else, having a consumer that actually is willing to pay for that. So we're trying to create some systems that help us. When we go down to the specific of the fuels, what we can see coming up in the short term in 2030 is biodiesel will have a role, and but will be a kind of a limited role because there is not a lot of sustainability feedstock to make biodiesel. We see very good potential in biomethane. Biomethane is generated out of waste, and one can liquefy it and use it exactly in the same way as one uses LNG. These technologies are completely commercial today. There are no issues whatsoever if we take good care of the emissions. I've said that before, and I will keep on saying that because this is really very, very critical for the success in terms of decarbonization of these fuels. So these are these are the ones that are available right now. But again, don't wait. There is biodiesel and biomethane are used by aviation, are used by the natural gas grid networks throughout Europe, for example, or in many other places where that is available. They are used by road. So don't wait and see and expect that something comes to you, because it most likely will not, and if it comes at a premium price. So our recommendation is really that you look around and see there are opportunities for investment in alternative fuel production facilities. In reality, you can actually even consider adopting a fuel agnostic strategy. First, finding manufacturing project that deliver fuels that has the characteristic that you need. And when I talk about characteristics, in reality, I'm talking about the decarbonization potential. So we're talking about the emissions intensity, for example.
Yeah.
So if you find something that has a very, very low emissions intensity, that's a good fuel to invest in, ensure offtake, and afterwards go and revamp your ship. Because actually the timeline to make a manufacturing project is comparable with the time, or actually takes sometimes longer than making the new ship. So you don't need to decide the fuel first in an abstracting manner, buy the ship, and then afterward frantically look for your alternative fuels. Consider, if that is possible in your operation, of course, consider doing the reverse. First, find some good project that allow the fuel that it gives you the best business case, depending upon the jurisdiction where you operate, and then afterwards invest in the ship. I think that could be a wise alternative to consider in your strategy.
Absolutely. I think that's a good order of things to consider when you're going to do investments. I would like to do one deep dive though, because sometimes when we solve one problem, we might create new problems. As you said with LNG. LNG was like the magic fuel 15 years back when I was in shipping. It was so clean. But it has a massive methane leakage. It's really a fossil fuel. It didn't really solve anything, really. It was, a new fuel, had some pros, lots of cons. Now we're turning into the first immediate solutions for a green pathway is the biofuel play. And we see concerns by scientists and politicians that we are then pushing into the bio market and that we actually might push into deforestation or take into other parts of the bio industry that is not intentional. Where are we on this?
We are at a stage where it is very clear that if the feedstock to any biofuel is a crop, or what is called first generation, so it's what comes from the soil first, then the risk that this creates unintended consequences somewhere else is really very large. We have seen EU policy pushing for the use of biodiesel in road transport has actually caused deforestation in many places around the world, and that is not something that we want to repeat. So definitely there is a big concern there. The feedstock that we use have to be waste type, is something that we don't want, something that doesn't have another use. And there are actually very interesting options. For example, in the biomethane, I've said that a couple of times already today, biomethane can be made out of waste that is unavoidable, sewage sludge, for example. It will be there as long as there are humans, so some portion can come from there. So this is an essential part, and it's also essential to be critical about the certifications that are in place. Because unfortunately, where there are money to be handled, there is also fraud, unfortunately, to be experienced. And the area has experienced fraud in terms of origin of the biofuel, so origin of the feedstocks to biofuel. So this is something definitely that we have to take the utmost care with.
Very good. I think it's important to have a very transparency around these issues. And, Virgin Airlines just had their first so-called green flight from the UK on renewed cooking oil. So I don't know how much cooking we have to do to fuel the global shipping fleet, but we have to eat a lot of French fries to get there, I think.
Yeah, what to comment there? This is the reason why we don't see this as really something that has a big future within shipping. I mean, you can your own think how much leftover oil you have in your kitchen every day, and think if you can power your car or your this is not going to be realistic. So of course there are exceptions. There are big there is the food industry that has big aggregation of used cooking oil, but that will not power the world. That we have to be absolutely clear about that.
Yeah. Very good. So we're going to open up for questions. So put your think hat on if you want to have a question or two. So while you think about that, maybe I can challenge you again, Rallo, on a principled approach here, because you mentioned EU legislation. There is different US legislation coming out, the whole IRA Act now. They are like doing the carrot, EU is doing the stick. We see a diversification of incentives around the world. How is that, you know, being a global company and really part of this big family here, is that a concern for you that there are different types of levels of regulations?
Well, I think that's rather easy to answer for me. We are a local expert, we are a global company. Yep. Once you're a global company, you do adhere to highest international rules. And as a shipyard, there are a number of those rules, including IMO and SOLAS and ISO standards for anything you can mention. And we do have all of that. But once you do include all that, it's not difficult to be aligned with the local rules, because they are in principle very similar. But I wish to use this opportunity and say that there are numerous regulatory issues, and you know, interpretation of those is becoming more and more unified and more clear. But implementation of those is a different issue. So the people need to be not just the government bodies, but the institutions and the commercial institution. And I like what my colleague about ports mentioned, that, you know, they are electrifying and the vessel comes, they're connected to the vessels. We in our shipyard, for example, have a rules. The vessel comes, no, you're not going to use your engine. You're going to be connected to our power grid, actually for our cables. So I have presently 34 vessels there, and they're all connected to the power, which is produced by electricity. So that's the start. You have an opportunity, you have an innovation factor, and you have a way of doing things. But in a way, we are rather blessed in Dubai. Dubai is very proactive in innovation, very proactive in environment. And you know, it comes from the young country of 52 years, but actually traditionally not young. If you go back in the history of UAE and Dubai, you will understand that those incredible people are coming either from, call it nomads, but they respected the nature. And they're coming from the fishermen, and they respected the oceans. And in this long history, but a short time of the country, they actually are evolving so fast to bring the value back. And I can see, I was mentioning before, we have a corals in our aquatorium. I can tell you, just last night I got my security call. I say, again, fishermen coming to our aquatorium. They want to fish because there is plenty of fish. So I said to my security, please kindly tell them to go away because it's a hazard to the safety. And I am laughing because my safety guy is here because he was also calling me about that. So joke aside, it's a pleasant to be in such environment. Yeah. So the sky is the limit. And being part of that, it's about really working hard and working together to look into opportunity, not just obstacles. There are obstacles all over, but there are also opportunity. And one needs to work very hard and smart to find the solutions. Solutions are along us. Thank you.
Very good. And that's my experience also from the finance sector, is that it's really hard to find these good projects. They're not always well promoted because they're like in between business to business projects and so forth. So I think we all have a job to identify the real developments actually taking place. Roberta.
I just have a small comment. I cannot agree more on Rado's position. Looking at regulation in reality have to be, besides the fact that we have to respect them, but they have to be kind of, they represent the status of something where the knowledge and the experience is settled or close to be settled. In reality, in a fast-moving environment like the one that we are in, regulations are very imperfect, and that should not be the only thing. Of course, you should always respect your regulation, but it should not be, you should do more than that. Just to give some example, so regulations are imperfect, and at the moment they are lacking homogeneity. For example, we see within Europe, we see that the FuelEU Maritime endorses well-to-wake kind of calculation for decarbonization. If we look at the EU ETS, the system is based on tank to wake. If we look again, if we take the IMO, is not clear about that. The IMO is the LCA policy that is under development at the IMO is looking at the moment at the well-to-wake perspective. However, while, for example, the FuelEU Maritime allows to credit negative emission, if you are so lucky that you have access to a fuel that is so good that it has negative emission, and there are some of those. The FuelEU Maritime allowed to credit those. The IMO doesn't seem to be allowing that. And certainly the GHG protocol doesn't allow that if you are trying to respect the corporate sustainability reporting directive. Finally, there are also rules about mass balancing. Some mass balancing is allowed in certain system, in some other system is not. So there are a lot of things, a lot of incongruences at the moment because regulations are developing. Of course, our regulators are kind of strapped from all the kind of conditions that they have to fulfill. So at the moment they are imperfect. So just be proactive, like Rado was alluding to. Be proactive, respect your regulation, but go beyond to try to make sure that you can fulfill all of them at once.
Absolutely, and there is no silver bullet here. So it's a super complex industry, but there is some mainstream trends that we are finally seeing emerging. There we have a few questions, so I'll jump down and give you the microphone. Oh, you have the microphone. Excellent, thank you.
Hello, my name is AJ. I run a bunker trading company. So we are in the thick of all this. Be part of a problem or a solution, you can decide.
A bit higher.
Okay. My question here is, European Union, I know there's an advantage. Okay. Keeping apart the 1.5 degree climate impact, they have this thing that they want to stay away from a dependency on fossil fuels because it's a cost to them. How are we, the Middle Eastern nations, motivated to join this cause? Because for them, it's saying no to money, because oil is probably the biggest GDP generator. So how I mean, probably Mr. Rado can answer this because he's quite close to the local authorities.
Very, very good question. I can start answering that because I'm from Norway, which is like, you have Saudi Arabia, Russia, Norway, big oil nations. And of course, it's very hard to stop producing oil because you're very used to this revenue stream and the jobs and everything, the infrastructure, the knowledge, it's all embedded. But in Norway, there's a big opposition to the oil industry now. But it's still, a parliamentary majority to continue it and even expand it beyond any recommendations from the IPCC. So that's a big controversy in my country. Although we can use that technology and knowledge to invest in renewables. But I think a core of the question is, of course, that energy security is a real concern in Europe now. They have to produce renewable energy or alternatives energy so that they don't depend on external energy providers. And this is, I think, also an opportunity for most governments in the world. There's a pathway to energy security if you start building your own renewable energy systems now. But I'll turn to Rado for thoughts on this community and how do you see this evolving?
Thank you. I will start with actually highlighting something you triggered to me. It's about, you're right about the regulatory issues. It's about people and the organization one belongs to very much, or the culture you come from, or the family you've been, or the friends. And we at DP World, I'm very proud to say it's in our DNA to really care about environment. But going to your questions, I have 3 answers for that. First, talking about Dubai, UAE, and large, you see, UAE is not really dependable on oil and gas. There are some new research and new capacity coming online with the gas, but it's less than 20%. I believe it's around 15%. It's very diversified industry. So that's first. Second, we at our business, and we are Dubai-owned company, government-owned company, commercially set up as part of DP World. We are focusing on 2 segments. Of course, it's oil and gas, but new generation, which has reduced emissions and impact to the environment. And of course, renewable, very much a leader in renewable, as I mentioned before. And it's all commercially stable. And we can discuss about the financial institution, which were very skeptic, but becoming online now, more and more. Last but not least, I really want to make it clear. You know, we're talking oil and gas like that's a poison. No, ladies and gentlemen, the other products from oil, much more than just energy, are everywhere around us. Oil is not just used to produce energy. Oil is used in any kind of industry, in plastic, which hopefully is becoming more clean, and anything else in chemical industry, which produces, including with the food, with preservation, with even paints and non-intrusive paints, car industry, many other things. So I don't see for the foreseeable future the oil and gas industry disappearing. I see it becoming progressively cleaner and cleaner, and it should meet the standards or objectives of neutral CO2 and the zero CO2. Technology is evolving and is already there. It just needs to be fine-tuned. And then progressively introduce other, which already is introduced, ammonia and hydrogen and so on. But it's a path to that. So hopefully I answer your question. Thank you.
And I think Roberto would like to comment as well.
If I understood the question correctly, I'm not completely sure, but there is space for many. It's not only about servicing the Fuel EU Maritime and the ship operating in Europe. It is, first of all, enabling everybody to comply with the IMO regulation. And then thirdly, which is perhaps also extremely attractive, many of the companies doing business today in Europe, even companies that have a foreign site, however, do business in Europe, have to comply with the Scope 3 emission, basically. So they have to, first of all, start reporting about their Scope 3 emissions, and then afterwards they will have to do something about those. So for all of those that ship goods from Indonesia to Rotterdam or wherever in Europe, at some point this will become a concern. And definitely the role of biofuel production in Indonesia, sustainable biofuel production in Indonesia, and similar will be critical to be able to enable all companies doing business in Europe to comply with the Scope 3 emissions requirement.
Another question from the group in the back here.
Thank you. Stefanie Sohm from Kühne Foundation. It was great to see this complexity of the sector, what you described. It needs to match the fuel, the ship, the port, everything needs to go together. I'm wondering, don't we have too many options that are semi-viable at this moment on the table? And do we have enough time to try around what will work, especially also because investments require certainty of the investors? So do we need more coordination towards one solution, or will it just sort itself out?
This is a home run for you.
Home run. This is a super good question, and it's really something that we all struggle about. Should we choose something and recommend that something? But it's not that simple. I think we receive some help into kind of, and then perhaps Thomas, you may disagree with me, so you just intervene. So some of these molecules that are touted as fuels of the future, ammonia, methanol, methane, are molecules that are already traded. It's not something that we are inventing right now. They are already traded. So I have a hope that the ports, not all the work that the ports are doing today is in vain. Some of these perhaps will fit into some market development that these molecules already are going to receive. Again, by having engine manufacturers enabling ship to switch fuel in the future, that will also help reducing the cost of streamlining. However, at the moment we cannot streamline because we basically do not have a silver bullet like Eric was saying. If we choose methanol, we are strangled by the cost of CO2. We have to use a carbon molecule to make methanol, and that carbon molecule is going to be very, very expensive. If we do ammonia, we are in danger of damage to the marine ecosystems. We are in danger of explosions and poison on board. If we use hydrogen, there is the problem of the explosion on board and the low energy density of the fuel. At the moment, we are not able to do that. But I can reassure you that as soon as that solution is enriched, that would be one of the first things that people will think of doing, because it's absolutely the most how can I say, beneficial for everyone.
Tom.
Yeah, I think we all agree the clock is ticking, so we need to speed up a number of things. But there is a very specific role for a number of governments across the globe, because we're talking about ammonia methanol. In some countries, these molecules are just not recognized as a fuel. So it will require another approach also from a regulatory point of view to make that a reality. So if everyone takes up his or her responsibility within this, on this avenue, then we might see a result sooner than later.
And I think it was a good question to close this session, because I think we heard where there are many pathways, but what's for sure, it has to decarbonize, and we have to monitor it. We will monitor it, and there are multiple pathways now. Great for investors, great for those who are seeking new opportunities, and great for the industry to really thrive in and build something. So please, a big hand for a great panel, and thank you all for coming.